So, students, let us see today's, that is 30th November 2015 articles. The first one is related to the terrorism. The author argues is, contrary to the popular belief, India is not a target to the global terrorism. But however, our leaders and also the leaders of the developed nations such as UK, they want to project India as also a victim of the global terrorism. He takes examples, either it is in Kashmir or Indian Mujahideen or Pak-sponsored terrorism. All these are having local presence. They have their specific reasons. The increased incidences of terrorism, they are majorly due to a belief that the Muslims are persecuted in India. If you take in this context, after Godhra riots, a series of terror events have increased in India. Similarly, after Babri Masjid, the demolition, again, the events have increased in India. It means a section feels that their identities are not getting properly protected and they want to, or certain disgruntled fringe elements, they want to show their existence through this particular violence. And in this, India, again, further if you see on a larger framework, most of the places where the global terrorism seeds are existing, these are either failed states or they are so-called as despotic states. Syria, Iraq, all these Middle East countries you can see on the same lines. If you go to Europe, the state though exists, the neoliberal economic policies made it relatively irrelevant to the welfare of the people. So in this context, the Paris attacks, etc., these are mostly influenced by the growing global terrorism, but their roots also lie in failure of the welfare policies initiated by their respective countries. This is what is the author argues. So in this context, India still has a strong welfaristic oriented state. So we have to, finally the carry home point is this. The sectarian violence, that is the way we have to see the violence perpetuated by the IS. It is Shias against Sunnis, Sunnis against Shias. This is what is the sectarian violence the IS is most interested in. So, this is what is the article talks about. What is the essence of the article? India is not the target of the global terrorism. Most of the terror incidents till today we faced, they have local origins. In this context, India still has a strong state to face this. And next is the Paris climate change. Now, understand that at the Paris climate change, India has a dual challenge. What is this dual challenge to India? One way it has to balance its developmental needs, and the other way it shall not appear as a roadblock to the negotiations or to a particular deal. This fine balance is necessary. So in this context, this particular article suggests certain steps. The first thing it says is, whatever the binding or whatever the negotiations or outcomes of the treaty are, they shall be made legally binding. And the next is, there has to be an effective review and update process. India has to pitch for this. And the update and review process has to be in such a way that it has to increase the pressure over the industrialized countries. So now, if industrialized and developed countries, they want to pull the India also into the binding commitments, don't you think that it is going to increase the pressure on India too? Then these people suggest a way. We have to take a differential approach based on progression principle. So from Kyoto Protocol onwards, common but differential responsibilities based on respective capabilities was the principle guiding the climate talks. Based on that, the starting point for the emission cuts, etc., has to be different for different countries. Now, America, it is historically responsible for greater accumulation. So the starting point has to be much higher emission cuts. In that way, India gains as a holistic measure from the total reduction in the emissions, because it is one of the countries that is very much susceptible to the climate change. So this they call it as differential approach based on the progression principle. So let's keep emission cut targets different for different countries, and India has to stress for a principle where it will take its emission cuts within its sustainable developmental goals. And already India has taken an elaborate plan towards its green development. But however, its developmental needs will not allow it to reduce its emission targets by till 2030. So India shall be able to explain this. So when India stresses for these 3 points, it will not be seen as a roadblock. And when India applies the differential approach based on progression principle, then India's developmental needs will be better protected. That is what this article argues. And the next is, plan for increased funding a must. We know that from Copenhagen, Cancun, Durban, if you take about all these things, in Copenhagen, for the first time, Green Climate Fund was announced. And here also, the $30 billion fast start finances were announced for 2010 to 2012. Now, from 2020 onwards, 100 billion per year will be set aside for the climate change. How this 100 billion per year will be spent is not clear. Who has to contribute to this fund is not clear. In this context, OECD made a report. What it says is this: last year, 2014, the total amount spent is around $62 billion. 2013, it was $52 billion. So there was no proper accounting mechanism and transparency. How did they spend this money? The OECD report is itself said to be biased and lacks accountability. Now, what we have to stress for is, India shall be a beneficiary of this Green Climate Fund rather than being a contributor. And this definite time frame has to be brought in, and transparent mechanisms have to be established for the Green Climate Funds. These are the things we need to understand. And the next is continuation to this. Now let us understand briefly about the climate change itself. You know that Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has come up. After this, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Then the Kyoto Protocol. In the UNFCCC, there are Annex 1 countries and non-Annex countries. These 37 Annex 1 countries, they have to bear the burden of commission cuts. So, based on this, the Kyoto Protocol has given 5% around reduction of the emissions on 1990 levels between the period 2008 to 2012. This is called first commitment period. The second commitment period is after this, that is 2013 to 2020. Now, this common but differentiated responsibilities based on respective capabilities slowly transformed into INDCs, intended nationally determined contributions. So now this INDCs plus the CBDR, common but differentiated responsibilities, how they have to be accommodated in the Paris conference is a major challenge. The next thing is, you know that for the past 2 days, a debate is going on the values of the Constitution, how they are understood today. So in this context, with regard to the minorities, what was the opinion expressed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar? If you carefully observe, he always took the minorities' rights as absolute. And the second thing is, when K.T. Shah, he proposed for including socialism, secularism and federalism in the first article of the Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar that based on few reasons. One is the secularism he considered as universal, so it need not be explicitly stated. And second is the socialism, how the society has to be organized at a later date that has to be decided by the need and circumstances of those times. The similar is the case with the federation too. So, this liberty of the future generation shall not be taken away by the constitutional framers of today. That's what is the opinion expressed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Coming to secularism, you can see Home Minister Rajnath Singh arguing that it was not the part of the original constitution, but it was added up at a later date to the 42nd Amendment Act. If we observe here, the principles of the secularism, they are inherent in the constitution. The philosophy was imbibed into fundamental rights and how the DPSP are organized. And most of the minority rights, they are, and religious rights, they are to protect these secular values. The 42nd Amendment Act just made it explicit. But there is a very positive thing over here. Prime Minister has made a beautiful statement here. What he said is, in India, or for this government, India is first, that is what is its religion, and constitution is its holy book. So this has set the tone, it shall dictate the tone for the government of the day. So these are the points we need to understand. And when Jawaharlal Nehru also brought in something called objectives or aims and objectives of the Constitution resolution, Ambedkar even then was not interested in bringing in these statements again and again in the Constitution. He felt that they are just repetition. Because the aims and objectives resolution in Indian Constitution is nothing but French Declaration of the Rights of Man. So that's why Ambedkar never spoke about something called as against to the secularism. The next is Sitaram's Yechury speech in Rajya Sabha. So this is about Constitution Day. So November 26th, 1949. So he was surprised to call it as a Constitution Day and reaffirm ourselves in the constitutional values. What he argues is our existence on this, in that parliament, and Prime Minister's authority to sit in that chair, all these flow from the very Constitution itself. So then where the question of reaffirmation comes from, that's what he argues about. And the second thing is, he says that there are duties in our Constitution, and the Article 51F says that we shall value the composite culture of India. He questions to what extent we are valuing that. And Article 51H, it talks about, 51AH, it talks about protection of or development of scientific temper. So Prime Minister Modi, he made a statement that when Karna was born or something, there is we have, in those good olden days we had known all this technology. When Ganesha's head was replaced with elephant head, we know something called plastic surgery. These are the comments which are being made. So these are not developing the scientific temper. So it is itself, we are not violating the Constitution. In this, there is a beautiful statement of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Will history repeat itself? Ambedkar answering this question, he said, it depends on, will Indians place the country above the creed, or the creed is placed above the country? If the creed is placed above the country, probably, yes, we may lose our independence again. So this kind of good statements over there which can be used in our essay writing. And the next is concern over airspace security. Till now, the missile system of India, they are consisting of a Pichora system which was acquired from Russia, I think, and they are totally obsolete. Due to lack of any strong air defense mechanism and delay in the process, the Defense Acquisition Council agreed to digitize this Pichora system. the surface to air missiles. Now, recently India has tested long range surface to air missile which was developed with the help of Israel. But however, our Akash recently, though inducted into Air Force, it was long delayed. So in this article, try to take this particular map into consideration, picture into consideration, and go through that once. And next is again India-Nepal issue. Let us update our knowledge with the recent events. If you see, after Nepal enacted their own constitution, India is saying that it is not representative of all the sections of the people. It raised its objections to it. Then in the Madhesi dominated areas there is violence, and fearing that violence, lack of proper law and order in this region, Indian truckers did not go into that or are not supplying the Nepal region. There are severe shortages in Nepal and it is going to worsen further in the winter. Nepal sees it as India's intentional blockade, but India says that it is not intentional but it is situational. So in this context, the Prime Minister of Nepal, Mr. Woli, he called for tripartite talks, that is, between government, opposition, plus United Democratic Madhesi Front. So in this is what is the situation in Nepal. Now, what the Nepal accuses is, the government of India is using plain-clothed Sahastra Seema Bal towards raising the disturbances in Nepal. So finally they have arrested detained 13 Sahastra Seema Bal bodyguards. Let us see how it takes a diplomatic turn. Now again, coming back to the climate change. If you take the Secretary of State John Kerry, he made a statement few days back, that is, India is going to be a challenge at the climate talks. Then what this challenge is? When it was questioned, there was no answer from United States. But on the other hand, United States tries to say that India, United States are partners in the climate change talks, or with regard to clean energy are concerned. This year the space is an expected question. So US-India partnership to advance the clean energy, that is called PACE. So what are the components of this PACE and what are non-conventional energy targets for India? What are India's INDCs? Including all these together, a question can be framed in UPSC. Try to go through that. And added to that, American representative quotes the China as an example. If you can see Copenhagen, India was marked as a blockade in the climate change talks. It was pushed to the corner. But at that time, all the BRICS countries were along with India. But later, China has agreed to the emission cuts. So, but India is the only country appears as a blockade in between. Probably from that perspective, Mr. Kerry might have called India as a challenger. In this case, in this article, we need to focus on what United States of America is going to pitch in the climate change talks at Paris. One thing is hybrid approach. So, it is not going to talk about upper ceiling of the emission cuts for countries, but it is going to talk about the rules and procedures that have to be followed. So, it is going to more stress on process rather than the targets. What America believes is this. If you prescribe upper targets, many countries which are already close to these targets will not perform well. And many of the European countries, they are close to the targets. And the second thing is the diversification of the investments on the global climate change fund. So our green climate fund. So it wants to pull in India, Mexico, China also as contributors towards the green climate fund to reach this $100 billion target. And finally, the private investments. So it wants to pitch in greater scope for the private investments. These are the 3 points which America is pitching for. Try to have those things. But do your homework on PACE and try to upload it for me so that I will be happy to correct you that. So these are the articles for today, and thank you very much.